The internet. We scroll, we socialise, we shop, we stream, we scroll some more. With billions of websites accessible with just one click, you are never short of something to do. But what we as average users see is often called the surface web or open web. Websites are typically accessed through Google, Chrome, Safari and the likes, social media, news sites, or the very platform we're now on as you watch this, YouTube. But this is a very small fraction of what actually exists online. The browsers we so commonly use only scratch the surface of what is out there, and many draw up examples likening the internet to an iceberg. It might shock you to learn that the surface web only makes up around 4% of the total internet. Beneath the surface we see lies the deep web. It accounts for an estimated 90% of the entire internet. The deep web is everything that isn't indexed by search engines, and you need the right credentials to access spaces. This includes things like paywalled sites, subscription content, cloud storage, email inboxes, academic databases, bank records, and medical files. When you log into Netflix or check your bank account online, that's where the deep web comes into play. Then there's the dark web, which is what we find ourselves intertwined with today. Whereas the deep web cannot be indexed by standard search engines, the dark web is intentionally kept hidden. Websites on the dark web don't end in the usual .com or .org addresses we're used to. Instead, they often end in .onion, and paying for things with cryptocurrency is commonplace. Safe to say for most of us, the dark web sounds like something out of a film. But for one Minnesota family in 2016, this was definitely not the case. Amy and Stephen Allwine, both 43, had been married for 20 years. They met at a Christian college, married, adopted their son, and really led a life devoted to faith and family. Being the mom of a 9-year-old and growing her dog training business kept Amy very busy. Stephen worked from home as an internet technology specialist and was an elder at a local United Church of God. He was a well-liked preacher, often helping couples going through relationship issues, and Amy was a deaconess. The couple would often make videos together to show the church and teach people how to dance, whilst making sure they were conforming with the church's values. The pair were well respected for their dedication to their faith, their family, and their 2-decade-long marriage. The Allwines were seen as a pretty perfect couple, and people would regularly come to them for marriage advice. In May 2016, the Allwine family were living in Cottage Grove in Minnesota with their now 9-year-old son Joseph. But one day, a knock came at the couple's door, which left them stunned. Amy and Stephen were met with 2 FBI agents who told them that Amy had been the intended target of a hitman. A website on the dark web called Besa Mafia had been infiltrated. Besa Mafia was a site where people could hire someone to assault, intimidate, or murder another person. People would select their service and pay in cryptocurrency. But this murder-for-hire company had no intention of carrying out any assassinations, instead swindling people out of their cash, knowing they couldn't go to the police to report them when it didn't go their way. Hundreds of people had placed orders for various hits all over the world, but eventually 5 men allegedly behind the scheme would be arrested after the website was hacked, the customer list leaked, and it was exposed as being fraudulent. One user, known as Dog Day God, had been contacting the website in the hopes of killing Amy. The leaked information the FBI now had showed that this user had become increasingly frustrated with Besa Mafia when they failed to carry out the hit, despite many arrangements and a lot of money changing hands. Over $12,000 in Bitcoin, in fact. Some of the plots included wanting Amy killed in a car accident, or burning the house down with Amy trapped inside. Luckily, no plan had been carried out, as it was all now obviously a scam site. But why her? What had she ever done to anyone? The FBI said that Besa Mafia had asked the user what their connection was to Amy, and they said Amy had slept with their husband, and they, quote, needed that bitch dead. The user added, "She is stealing clients from my business. I want this bitch dead." Amy was horrified. She had never had an affair, and whatever the issue was with her business, she had no idea. She'd been working hard for years growing it and had never stolen anything from anyone to make it more successful. Amy was so freaked out she started limiting her time going outside, installed CCTV and added extra locks to the doors and windows. Stephen even bought a gun for her own defence. Her anxiety was completely taking over her body, and she started to get terrible migraines from the stress and spent most of her time in bed feeling ill and drained. And then, in July 2016, Amy started getting emails from an unknown sender. Someone who called themselves Jane, who clearly knew a lot about her. They also spoke about this alleged affair that Amy had had and why she should take her own life before her family starts being killed. This person was specific. They could tell Amy where her car was parked on certain days and the clothes that Joseph had been wearing. One email had read, "Commit suicide. By the time I am done with you, you will want it to end anyway, so why not do it now? If you do not, then you will slowly see things taken away from you, and each time you will know that you could have stopped it, which will eat you apart from the inside." Another email read, "Amy, I still blame you for my life falling apart. I don't know how a fat bitch like you got my husband. Because of you, he left me and my life has become shit. It looks like you already know about me. I see you have put up a security system now." It went on to list her family members and where they lived, information about her business, Joseph, and told her all the ways she should take her own life, as it was going to be the only way to end this. Amy, mentally and physically sick with worry, took the ominous emails back to the agents, but the sender couldn't be traced thanks to an email with no IP address. The email was simply jane@gmail.com. It was clearly the same person that had failed to have the hit taken out on her, but whoever this person was must have confused her with someone else. However, with no way of Amy telling them that, and no way of tracing this person, Amy was stuck in a really dark place. November 13th, 2016. A cool, crisp, snowy day, 10 days before Thanksgiving. Amy, trying her best to carry on with things, was up early steaming some pumpkins to make pies with. Stephen was in his basement office working. At about 12 p.m, Stephen, Amy and Joseph sat down for lunch, but soon after they'd eaten, Amy said she was feeling dizzy and lightheaded again. At around 1 p.m, Amy's dad came over and Stephen told him that Amy was in bed again. An hour later, her dad left, but minutes later, Stephen called him and asked him to come back to pick Joseph up so that he could take Amy to the doctors. He agreed, picked him up, and the pair left. At around 5 p.m, Stephen called Amy's dad to tell him he was running late because he needed to stop at a gas station, and half an hour later he pulled up. When he asked how his daughter was, Stephen said Amy had decided not to go to the doctors in the end. Stephen and Joseph then went out to eat at Culver's and returned to the house just before 7 p.m. As soon as they got home, Joseph went into his parents' room and walked in on something that no child should ever see. Amy lay dead on the floor, a pool of blood around her head. Beside her elbow was a 9mm handgun. Stephen called 911.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
I think my wife shot herself. There's blood all over.
Shot herself with a gun?
It looks like it.
Does she still have the weapon?
I don't know. We just got.
Did she shoot herself?
I don't know. I just saw her in blood.
Okay. Do you see her right now?
No, I'm with my son.
Sir, do you know if she was breathing at all?
I don't.
Okay,
We just got from dinner.
Okay, would you like to check on her and see if she is, or do you believe that she's beyond help?
Stay there for just a second. They want me to go check on her. Hang on.
Okay.
She's not breathing. I can't tell where she's shot. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know, bud.
We're gonna remarry.
I don't know, bud.
Are there any other weapons in the residence there?
Yes, there's a shotgun in the room.
Okay, is the shotgun the one she has?
No, she had a handgun.
Is it just you and your son home right now?
Yes.
Okay. Steven, are you able to just step out of the home with your son so that my officers can see you when they pull up?
Yeah.
Minutes later, Cottage Grove police were on the way, and one of the first officers there, Gwen Martin, said she knew from the address that it was Amy. She had spent 8 weeks teaching a group of people about law enforcement, and one of those keen to learn had been Amy Allwine. They pulled up to the Allwines' home, which sat on 26 acres set back from the road. It was dark and bleak, the roads covered in snow. When Gwen saw Amy, despite her 18 years in the force and everything she had seen over this time, she burst into tears. She said her mind was racing, whirling. There was no way Amy would have shot herself. Surely not. How could this be, she thought. The smell of food floated through the house. The pumpkins that Amy had been roasting were still cooking away, the oven still on. Amy was lying face up on the floor. Her pants were unbuttoned, her hands by her sides. A gunshot wound was in the right side of her head, and a shell casing was by her right leg. Despite Stephen's initial thoughts that the wound was self-inflicted, it didn't take long for it to become obvious that all was not as it seemed. The gun was by her left elbow, yet the bullet had gone in on the opposite side of her head. Amy was right-handed, and the angle she would have had to twist her wrist into to get the opposite side of her head, and at the downward trajectory the bullet had gone in, would have been near on impossible. Her hands were completely clean too, no gunshot residue, and no blood on them. A toxicology report showed that Amy's blood had an extremely high level of scopolamine in it, more than 45 times what would be prescribed as a therapeutic dose. Amy had never had a prescription for this. Scopolamine is commonly given to combat nausea and sickness, especially after surgery, and in high and heavy doses, the drug can make people disoriented, unconscious, and even cause memory loss. The medical examiner confirmed that Amy had died at around 3:15 p.m. or slightly earlier. Joseph would have been with his granddad, but Stephen would have been at home with Amy. In fact, he said he had spoken to her at around 5 o'clock as she was praying in the bedroom. But evidently, this was impossible. 2 days later, Stephen was at the police station. He was quiet and teary and sat with his head down for most of his 2-hour-long interview. He said he had no idea why his wife would have shot herself. He said he didn't see it coming and he felt like it was his fault. As far as the emails went, he had no idea who would have sent that to her either. Stephen said he knew she hadn't had an affair and he couldn't understand why somebody would accuse her of that. He did, however, admit to having an affair himself, with a lady named Michelle 2 years beforehand, one thing that he had never told anyone about before, and one that Amy didn't know anything about either, but he wanted to come clean in case it looked a certain way. During his interviews, it was clear he couldn't stick to the same story twice. He couldn't even remember how many times he'd been in and out of the house that day. Investigators at the house noticed that the floors in most rooms had a lot of dog hair on them, but a particular area of the hallway was absolutely spotless, as if it had just been cleaned. A spray of luminol around that area showed that an extensive cleanup of blood had taken place. Pools of blood and loads of bloody footprints which indicated the person's shoe size was a 12. The hallway, the bathroom, and even Joseph's room were just as covered. Detectives learned of the strange things going on in the months before. Because the FBI had been handling it, it just hadn't really been passed over. Those awful emails telling her to take her own life, the Baser Mafia information, and now Amy was dead. The medical examiner agreed with the police and said they could not rule Amy's death as a suicide, so it was left undetermined. Detectives knew everything simply was pointing to homicide, and it didn't take a genius to start connecting the dots. The more they listened back to Stephen's 911 call...
Do you see her right now?
No, I'm with my son.
Sir, do you know if she was breathing at all?
I don't.
The stranger it sounded. He didn't actually, at any point, even ask for help. It was like he was just calmly listing the things in front of him. No gunshot residue had been found on Amy's hands, but a swab of Stephen's hands showed there was residue on him. He was also a size 12, which matched the bloody footprints. They needed to go through all of his devices, which is where everything started to fall into place even more. They found a large amount of computer equipment in his office basement. It was clearly a very sophisticated and technologically advanced setup. He admitted to one affair, but they actually uncovered at least 3 affairs that Stephen had been having, using the website Ashley Madison, a site he found out about while he was counselling couples in the church. Ashley Madison caters to married or committed individuals seeking extramarital affairs. Experts looking at his computers found that Stephen had spent thousands of dollars in Bitcoin on the dark web to pay for various illegal services, goods and transactions. Lo and behold, one website he visited was Besa Mafia, under the username Dog Day God, the same username that the FBI had told them about. He told them that Amy would be travelling for a dog training competition in Illinois, but he said if the murder couldn't happen there, she was also going to be in Atlanta a few weeks later. They went back and forth on the website discussing different prices that would get you different things. If you wanted something to look like an accident, it was a certain price. If it was cold-blooded, it would be a different price. Dog Day God typed, the target will be travelling out of town about a 3-hour drive from Chicago. What's the price in Bitcoin for a hit, and ideally making it look like an accident? On the 6th of March, Dog Day God sent a picture of Amy from a holiday in Hawaii to the website. This was seconds after Stephen downloaded that very picture from the couple's computer. Besa Mafia told Dog Day God how to buy Bitcoin, and a few days later, Stephen bought Bitcoin. On March 22nd, Stephen copied his wallet address to the Notes app on his iPhone 5. Less than 30 seconds later, Dog Day God sent that exact wallet address to Besa Mafia, and then Stephen deleted that note on his phone. He then reported to police that he had been the victim of a scam, having lost almost $6,000 whilst trying to purchase Bitcoin. The fact that Stephen had the wallet address written down was the biggest smoking gun of all. It was impossible for this to be any kind of coincidence. It tied Stephen to everything in a way that was undeniable. In total, almost $13,000 in Bitcoin was sent over many weeks, until ultimately it was agreed that Amy would be killed at her house, and the hitman would then set fire to it. But obviously this didn't happen as planned, as, unbeknownst to Stephen, it was all a scam. Besa Mafia told him that the hitman had been stopped by the police and arrested. Stephen must have been incredibly frustrated, but unperturbed, he went onto another website called Dream Market to ask about buying scopolamine, the same drug found in Amy's blood at over 40 times the standard dose. And as for those emails from Jane, the username S.Allwine had downloaded the software Tor onto Stephen's MacBook Pro, and a note on the MacBook read sharklasers.com, a site that allows users to send anonymous emails. A day before Amy got the first email from Jane which talked about her family members and where they lived, Stephen had searched for the same specific addresses and family information. He was Jane. He was Dog Day God. He was Amy's killer. When the plan to have her killed with a hitman didn't work out, the emails started. One has to wonder how much he was planning ahead to start painting a picture. Was he hoping she would actually take her own life, or was he hoping to provide some sort of cover for himself when he eventually killed her, and he could then point to her emails? Police believe he bought drugs with the intention of rendering her pretty out of it and helpless, and decided he would then shoot her himself. As well as his affairs, which showed he was clearly not interested in his marriage, but unable to file for divorce, as well as the technological evidence, they also learned of Amy's $700,000 life insurance policy, of which he was the sole benefactor. It is believed that Stephen drugged Amy before shooting her in the hallway where all the blood was, and then moving her body to the bedroom, where he tried to stage the scene. He spent the hours their son was out of the house cleaning up, then went to pick Joseph up and let him find his mom. Fred Fink, who manages the criminal division for the Washington County Attorney's Office, said, "I've never seen a case this complicated. Most of the time we're dealing with human witnesses, but this one requires a significant amount of electronic and scientific evidence." Finally, in January 2017, 2 months after Amy was killed, Stephen was arrested. His church released a statement expressing their profound sadness and shock at the whole situation. Someone they had held so highly had done something so awful to somebody so cherished. In February 2017, he was back in the courtroom for attempting to contact his son, which he had been specifically told not to do. And the following month, the grand jury indicted him, and his charges were now premeditated, first-degree murder. The prosecutors laid out a lot. The money, religious guilt, double lives online, affairs. The man that preached and counselled couples in church was living the most polar opposite life possible. But Stephen's attorney said there was little physical evidence tying him to the crime and suggested the crime scene had been contaminated. His lawyer said it sounds like an amazing story, but it's not a TV show or a movie, but real life. Just because he had an affair doesn't mean he killed his wife. But as much as Stephen had thought he had covered all his bases and done it anonymously, the crime scene did not lie. His computer did not lie. The blockchain did not lie. In January 2018, Stephen Allwine was convicted of first-degree premeditated murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called him cold and a hypocrite. "You are an incredible actor. You can turn tears on and off," he said. For obvious reasons, this case was incredibly complicated and saw multiple different agencies join forces to piece the dark timeline together. And then, in mid-2025,
tonight, at least 2 convicted murderers are trying to get a new trial because the credibility of one of the state's go-to experts just took a huge hit.
Mark Lanterman had been involved in thousands of criminal and civil cases in his career, and he had analysed more than 60 computer devices tied to the Amy Allwine case for the prosecution. But it appeared that Hennepin County started relying on his expertise without independently verifying his credentials. He said that he graduated from Uppsala College in New Jersey, but Mark said he was unable to get the transcript. The Hennepin County's attorney's office then started to inquire about his past after a Wisconsin lawyer presented his own evidence that raised questions. It is unclear whether or not this will have any bearing on Stephen getting a new trial, but many think even if this is the case down the line, there was a huge mix of investigating teams that handled this case, long before Mark even got to it, and the evidence would still really only point one way given the amount of people that found the same things. Amy's sister Julie said that her poor sister's last few months were a living hell. Amy woke up that November morning, ready to do a job she loved in a business she'd spent so long building up. She was going to spend time with Joseph and bake some nice things for her family. She was really trying to move ahead despite feeling so awful and scared. It is unknown what those last moments were like, whether she was unconscious or aware, whether she realised she had been betrayed by the one man she had trusted and loved for 2 decades. Someone that bought her a gun for her own protection, someone that had stood by her when all of this was going on. Her best friend Jane said that Amy was the kind of person who, when you looked in her eyes, you just saw good and kindness, a purity, a loving and genuine soul. She smiled with her eyes and cared deeply about everything and everyone in her life. Amy had lived a simple, happy and fulfilled life. She really wanted for nothing, believing she had it all right there at home. Her son, her husband, her job and her faith were all she needed. It really is such a sad end to someone's life who gave everything she had and everything she was to everyone else. If you'd like to support our channel and help us to continue to make content, please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. It helps us so much and we really appreciate it.